Right now is a real moment that our people need in order for us to be able to talk about what's really happening. We need a Build Back Better plan right now.
We knocked on doors. We need solutions. The Build Back Better plan has the solutions that we need.
We knocked on doors for you to get you elected, and just how we got you elected, we can get you out of office if you don't support what you promised us.
We need 7 million citizenship for 7 million. We need the Build Back Better plan right now.
My name is Blanca. I was brought here to the United States when I was 3 years old. And in 2010, my grandparents both got deported because of SB 1070. And I'm here because I definitely believe that we need a pathway to citizenship.
All right, what's up, guys? So you've probably seen that video by now. Actually, you might not have seen that because I know, half the internet was basically down today, which honestly was a pretty good thing. But at the same time, it's like, I want you to watch my content. So hopefully you got to get a day off the internet, but you're also watching my content and you're able to watch my content at the same time, right? Truly the best of both worlds. So true. But anyways, if you haven't seen that video by now, that was the scene of Kyrsten Sinema basically being chased down by this group of far-left illegal immigrant, ironically, which really I think adds to the whole narrative of the situation, but illegal immigrant girls at Arizona State University. These Arizona State students chased her into a bathroom and, were screaming at her, shouting at her about immigration and, not coddling open borders enough, this and that, right? But even to add even more to the situation, it looks like that night, apparently activists also managed to track her down to her hotel room, okay? So they actually stood outside of her hotel chanting things at her, screaming things at her, this and that. And listen. Let me say that this is not something that is particularly exceptional. Like, we see this happen all the time on college campuses. We know that this is how, most left-wing Zoomers tend to behave. Hell, something like this may have already happened to one of you on your college or your high school campus, or maybe just out in the real world, right? And we also know that even at Arizona State, right, the same exact school that this happened at, which, by the way, I should note, isn't particularly an outward conservative school, but tends to be kind of in the middle, right? They're definitely no Berkeley, no University of Michigan. Like, this is a school that's fairly kind of centrally aligned for, college standards at least. This is the same exact school where a few weeks ago we had that Blue Lives Matter sticker incident, occur where that girl approaches this guy in a library and starts screaming and going crazy woman. Well, it's very interesting, right? It's always a girl. Always girls that are doing this. Many such cases. But I'll stop making the jokes. I'll stop making the jokes and just simply say I think that the reason why this scenario is more exceptional to us is because of the fact that Kyrsten Sinema is not a conservative. Kyrsten Sinema is not a Republican, right? Kyrsten Sinema is a Democrat. She is a moderate, quote-unquote, Democrat, at least relatively speaking, but this is still a Democratic senator from the state of Arizona. And so I think that's why this sort of stood out to conservatives in being sort of a scenario where even Democrats, right, partisan Democrats from the Democratic Party who are generally liberal are getting treated the same exact way that the left treats most of us most of the time, okay? Now, I'm not really going to talk too much more about that incident itself because I think we just understand it, right? Well, as the left gets more radical, they're just going to start basically doing the same thing to their moderate flank so that way they can just continue pushing to the left. And basically the goal here is to intimidate and sort of control Kyrsten Sinema so that she's able to kind of just get in line, this and that. Look, I think we all understand that. The real question I have and the real kind of concern I have is how exactly should conservatives actually respond to this entire situation? Because on one hand, I get it and I kind of understand why conservatives wanted to make a big deal out of this and were sharing it around Twitter and stuff like that because of the fact that, obviously, I will say, I do think, I'd have no problem with people using this as an example to show people, hey, look how far the left has become. Look how radical the Democrats have become. Look, now they're even coming after their own. Like, even Kyrsten Sinema's not woke enough for them, this and that. Like, okay, whatever. I'm fine with that, to be honest. The concern I have is this sort of other kind of further conservative response I see to the entire situation. And in order to illustrate that, I'm going to read off a message I saw yesterday in Laura Loomer's Telegram channel. Now, before I read this, let me just say that I'm a big fan of Laura Loomer. I like Laura Loomer. I like her a lot. I think she's done a lot for the movement, right? And so this definitely does not come out of a place of personal animosity. I'm a fan of hers, right? I like her, but I really do have issue and I really do disagree with sort of this response to the entire situation. situation. So, just to read off what Laura Loomer sent to her Telegram channel, she says, quote, "It is a felony in Arizona to record someone in a bathroom without their consent. Tomorrow morning, when their office opens, contact the Arizona Attorney General's office to report the felony sexual harassment of Senator Sinema and demand that these illegals are prosecuted and deported back to Mexico, where they came from." Okay, so let me just say, by the way, second part of that statement, I really don't have an issue with it. But I do have an issue with the sort of principle of this, which is like, yeah, I get it, right? I get what she's trying to do. But let me ask the question, why exactly is it the job suddenly of conservatives to be the ones who stick up for Kyrsten Sinema? Because Kyrsten Sinema, you know, this is not exactly someone who, again, is one of us, who is someone who is on our side. All we want to talk about how much she's a moderate Democrat, quote unquote. Let us remember, she still supported H.R. 1, right? She still voted to impeach Trump both times. And really, on most issues, she's ultimately going to just simply vote along party lines most of the time. I understand, like, they try to negotiate with her, but at the end of the day, you still see this woman repeatedly just choosing to vote with the rest of her party. So let me again ask the question, you know, considering that this is the party she supports, this is a party she is a part of, right? These are the policies and the politics and sort of the cultural movement that she does enable, right? Like let's face it, by being someone who is embracing the politics that she does, even if they are a kind of a Trojan horse moderate sort of approach to things, right? Ultimately, let me just say that Kyrsten Sinema is someone who has enabled the mob, and she is still someone who is basically egged on by the mob at most occasions. So why exactly, right? Why exactly should we feel a high degree of sympathy to the extent to which we're actually going to help people who basically have coddled the mob, have enabled, you know, people like this and ideas like this and behaviors like this to take place, and then suddenly it is they themselves that are consumed by the mob? Why exactly should we feel bad for that? And why exactly should it be necessarily our job to really get out here and like be the one sticking up for her, you know? Because if she is really a part of the Democratic Party and sort of the liberal apparatus, shouldn't it really be their job? Shouldn't it be the job of like her party to stick up for her? And really, they're not doing it, right? I don't think I've even seen this covered at all whatsoever in the liberal media by Democratic politicians, whatever. But like, that's exactly the point, right? That's exactly the point. They've basically sold her out. But with that being said, yes, it is true that her party and the politicians around her and the media around her basically sold her out. But those are the people she has chosen to align herself with, right? Now, let me ask you this question, because before you say, well, you know, shouldn't we be the movement that's all about class, right? Aren't we like better than the left? Isn't that our whole appeal? Okay. Let me ask you this question. This is, I think, the real reason why I'm just not a fan of us going out here, calling the Arizona Attorney General in support of Kyrsten Sinema, trying to like stick up for Kyrsten Sinema to an excessive level, right? So let me ask this question, okay? Let me ask this question. Because, look, I'm really of the opinion that it is her party, it is her voters. Like, apparently they can't vote because they're illegal, but they supported her, right? But this is her party, her voters. You know, it's her problem. And quite frankly, unless she wants to turn into like an actual conservative, you know, we should not be showing sympathy for the moderate people who are simply Trojan horses for H.R. 1 and, you know, the other radical measures to transform America, you know, this and that. But let me ask the question to the people who think it should just be a matter of class. We as conservatives should just simply be acting classy, and that's why we should kind of stick up for her. Let me ask the question. Has Kyrsten Sinema ever stood up for all of the Trump supporters who have not just been harassed in public like her, but beaten in public and openly been persecuted by the government? Has she stood up to for the Trump supporters who, in many cases, and some of these went viral, at that university, at Arizona State, which is in her state, obviously? Has she ever stood up for any of those people? Has she ever stood up for us? Has she ever stood up for us against the mob? No. She has been silent. She's been silent for a reason, because deep down she's kind of supported that. She's basically supported the mob, at the very least enabled the mob, right? And so that's why she remains silent. That's why she, you know, doesn't spend time actually sticking up for us. So with that being said, why should we return the favor? Because if her entire shtick was, you know, I'm just going to kind of let the mob do that. You know, they're taking out my political opponents. They're intimidating my political opponents. Don't worry about it. Why should our response be, oh, no, Kyrsten, we got you. Okay, whoa, stand in the face of this mob. Really, I have no sympathy, really no reason to want to do that, okay? Like, that is my big problem. Sure, to the extent to which it helps us to show, hey, look, the radical left is becoming so left-wing, okay, whatever, sure. But conservatives really should not be spending resources to stick up for her. Conservatives should not be spending time out of their day, and, you know, knowing how it is trying to call political offices, it's probably like at least an hour out of their day sticking up for someone who doesn't like you, basically wants the eradication and votes for the eradication of your political presence in America, right? Conservatives should not be spending all that time sticking up for someone who would not do the same for you and is actively against you and is actively trying to work against you. I don't care how moderate they claim to be. And I think this ultimately reflects a bigger issue with our movement, right? And to illustrate the core behind this problem and the reason why I feel like we just do this so much, let me kind of make this analogy to you, okay? So imagine for a moment the conservative movement like an army, okay? And figuratively, okay, this is a metaphor. I'm not saying we're actually going to be an army, but imagine it like an army. So let's just say there's the center, right? There's the center, and this is just kind of the core division, the core battalion of conservatives, right? And so the center, the sort of just the center flank is just made up of sort of your normal, you know, MAGA supporting, Trump supporting, maybe Southern Baptist boomer conservative, right? That's kind of just like the average caricature stereotypical conservative in America. So that's the center of the army, right? Now, on the right side, you have what I would consider to be the right flank, okay? And I would say that the right flank is obviously the people who are further to the right, right? And you know, more specifically, these are the types of people who would often be labeled as others as being, you know, more radical, more extreme, dissident, right? This is the further right flank of the movement. Now, on the other hand, you have the left flank. And the left flank, you know, really are what I have often referred to as woke conservatives, right? More liberal conservatives, kind of just center-right people, more moderate people, more people who kind of represent a more like liberal left-wing version of conservatism, quote unquote, right? So this is what you have. You have the center, you have the right flank, and you have the left flank. Okay, I think we can understand that analogy. Now, I noticed very often it is a trend in the conservative movement to consistently try to push away, disavow, blacklist, ignore the right flank, but continuously always prop up the left flank. And that's to say, like, you know, we get super excited every time someone like Tulsi Gabbard or Bill Maher or, you know, Kyrsten Sinema, whoever, Joe Manchin, you know, gets up and says something like somewhat reasonable, somewhat rational, and we're always promoting it. Like literally anytime, I noticed this too, anytime Bill Maher has a monologue basically calling out political correctness, calling out wokeness, it always goes viral. And you see Dan Crenshaw and all these people reposting it on their social media saying, look at Bill Maher, you know, look at the liberals taking our side. And this is, I think, the same exact reason why LGBT conservatism or, you know, LGBT for Trump has become such a thing, right? It is this trend to want to basically prop up the left flank in our movement. Meanwhile, we know the story with the right flank. The right flank constantly gets slandered, blacklisted, name-called, pushed away, ignored, disavowed. Like, we know the story there, right? Now, on the other hand, okay, so it's the trend of the conservative movement to constantly, again, prop up our right flank, try to push away prop up our left flank and try to push away our right flank. So inevitably, if we keep doing that, what is happening to the conservative movement and generally the Overton window of the conservative movement? Well, if you are constantly, again, pushing away your right side and pushing to the left, inevitably, the conservative movement is ultimately moving to the left, right? In the grand scheme of the Overton window, things aren't moving to the left, okay, for conservatives. Now, keep in mind, what is the left, like the actual political left, not the left flank of our movement, but the actual political left. How do they treat things, right? So let's look at their movement. You have the center, kind of your average Joe Biden supporting liberal. Now, on the left side, you have like the radical left-wing activists, i.e. the Arizona State students, right? Those kids at Arizona State, okay? And then on the right flank, you have people like Kyrsten Sinema, right? The more moderate people. Notice what's going on here, right? Would they ever stick up for Kyrsten Sinema? No, they literally ignored the situation because they're allowing their left flank to push. So this is what happens. The left pushes away its right flank so that it can move to the left. It can actually move in the direction it wants to. Meanwhile, the conservative movement, and you wonder why I always say that, and many people always say that the conservative movement nowadays is basically controlled opposition, or it is just liberalism of 20 years ago. At the same time that the left consistently pushes away its right flank and moves to the left, the right also pushes away its right flank and moves to the left. So what happens? Left and right are moving in the same direction. What is happening in the grand scheme of things to the country? Inevitably, the politics and the culture and the everything of the entire country are going to move to the left entirely. And both conservatives and liberals are the ones that are empowering it and causing it to happen. Complicated analogy, I know, but that's all to say. We need to be very careful, okay? We need to be very careful in the future. We need to be a lot more skeptical of our just immediate willingness to, number one, disavow people on the harder right, but also to really prop up people and really try to take up causes that are taking place on our left flank. Because this is ultimately what we are allowing to happen. Now, if you want to reverse the course, in the grand scheme of things, if you want to reverse the long-term leftward drift of our country that we've seen over the past few decades, ultimately, at some point, you have to stop pushing left. You have to stop propping up the left flank and have to start pushing right and propping up, or at the very least, allowing the right flank to kind of do its course. So that way, the Overton window actually stops shifting to the left and actually starts shifting in our direction. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, but this is ultimately has to be our goal in the future, okay? And this is why it drives me crazy at this point to see the constant propping up of, hey, look, this liberal is against critical race theory. This liberal supports free speech. But, okay, what is kind of propping that up as conservatism and allowing that in our tent in the long term going to do for our movement? Now, I know what the obvious objection to what I'm saying is going to be. And that's to say, Vince, don't we need people in our coalition, right? Don't like moderate liberals, disaffected liberals actually coming over to our side, but not becoming wholly conservative, just kind of becoming like common sense, free thinker, centrist liberal, whatever, right? Doesn't that actually give us more votes, right? Doesn't that kind of add to our coalition, and that'll help us in 2022, and that'll help us in 2024, this and that. So, I get it, right? You don't want to like push to the left, but also you need voters, and you need the votes, and you need the support. Let me actually give an objection to that, which is, I think, the fact that this is, again, a conservative tendency to think in too short term, right, the 2022 election like it's the most important thing ever, and not really think in the long term of where we have been heading as a country and where we're going to head as a country. And the reason I'm going to bring that up, and the analogy I'm going to make is, and I'm going to remind people of this, right? Because in the modern day, I think the big conservative boogeyman, no conservative wants to be called this, conservatives tend to hate this, is what? Is a neoconservative, right? It's the boogeyman of our movement. We hate the neocons, right? This and that. Okay, well, and I understand, and I agree with that. I know I said it kind of sarcastically, but I fully agree. Neocons are a huge problem. Neocons have derailed our movement. Neocons are a big reason why our movement has been pushing to the left and not to the right. We know the issues. We know the problems with neoconservatives, but I don't think most people know this. So quick history lesson, or let's at least remind you, because I think we've talked about this before, where neoconservatives, where the modern origins of neoconservatism came from. Neoconservatives, and what morphed into in the 80s being considered to be neoconservatives. Now, to be honest, personally, I think I have a slightly different view on this, but this is the common consensus, and when you call someone a neoconservative, this is basically what you're saying. The modern origins of, the Bill Kristols, the John Boltons, right, the neocons, came in the late 60s and early 70s from disaffected liberals, okay? So these were people in the 60s and 70s, and again, this is where the neocons came from. The people who have destroyed our movement came themselves from liberals, right? They were basically more moderate liberals who didn't like the left-wing propping up of Palestine in, the Six-Day War. They didn't like the fact that George McGovern, the Democratic candidate in 1972, was so far to the left, right? And so these were people who, much like these disaffected liberals of today, this sound familiar? Like, this is not a new phenomenon, right? Back in the 60s, these were people who were generally more liberal on issues, but were like, the left is too far left to me. Let me actually go over to the right, because, I don't agree with everything the right does, but they're definitely much more rational than left, so I'm going to join this camp, okay? And that's where the modern neoconservatives came from. You can research this, you can read up about this on yourself if you want, like if you don't believe me. But again, keep in mind, the people that have derailed our movement, the people who have caused so many problems for our movement, the people who have turned our movement into controlled opposition, originate from disaffected liberals who felt politically homeless and ended up just ultimately coming over to our camp. Now, keep in mind, to give the neocons credit, they did help Ronald Reagan win by a huge landslide, right? They at least aided it, right? They were a significant part of the Reagan coalition. Nobody disputes this. But what happened after that, right? In the short term, okay, we won the 1980 election. We would have won it anyway, but by the big margin. We won in 1984, and the neocons helped us. And again, maybe with the disaffected liberals of today, maybe with the new neocons of today, we'll win in 2022, maybe. We'll win in 2024, maybe. But just like neocons ultimately ended up derailing our movement in the past, what do you think adding in the disaffected liberals and their influence and their voice into the tent, what do you think that's ultimately going to do to our movement in the long term? You know? And so I just ask you, what's more important to you? What's more important to you, the winning of one, or I wouldn't even say the winning, because I think we can still win them anyway, assuming certain things are true. So just the good performance in like 1 or 2 elections from now, or the long-term health of the movement and actually sustaining a movement that is competent and actually principled enough to be able to take back the country, or at least have a shot to do so in a competent way. What is more important to you? Because I get it, winning an election, it feels great, right? It's like watching your team win the Super Bowl, whatever. But do we ever stop and consider where stuff like this actually, goes in the long term? And so that's all to say. Again, we need to be extremely careful, whether it's Kyrsten Sinema, whether it's Bill Maher making a anti-woke rant, whether it's I don't know who else is there. Karlin Borisenko, who's, is someone who calls herself literally a liberal, but just says, oh, I'm anti-critical race theory, pro-free speech, this and that, right? We need to be very careful about how often and in what capacity we prop up these people. And we have to stop jumping and like propping up these people, I think, really in the way that we are. It's a very dangerous game we're playing. It's a very dangerous game we're playing to, basically redefine our movement to be basically just about free speech and nothing less, and nothing else, rather, because conservatism really is more about just free speech and freedom and free expression, and actually it's not. I would argue, actually, those are kind of more tenets of liberalism, but we'll save that for another video, okay? But it's all to say, seriously, be careful about this. Stop propping up people who, number one, I think outwardly are your enemies, but even if they kind of claim to be on your side, and maybe if they're not even intending to do it, are just ultimately going to derail the future of the movement, just stop with it. Okay, stop with it. Think smart and think in the long term. Anyways, guys, with that being said, thank you very much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed. Hope your internet is working at least to watch my video. But a day off the internet's quite good, isn't it? If you haven't become a member yet, consider becoming a member for exclusive content, exclusive shout-outs, some great stuff. I actually sent out the member shout-outs today. We love to see it, so consider becoming a member to support the channel and fight back against demonetization. Be sure to like and subscribe on the video. And until next time, folks, remember, alpha moves only. God bless. Peace. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe, and be sure to click some of the stuff on my left for some more awesome content. Also, to follow me on social media, check out my podcast, and some more awesome stuff, be sure to check out the links down in my description. All right? Peace.